Thank you, Trev. I wanted to introduce Secretary Paul Steinman from District 7, Florida Department of Transportation. He manages the Florida Department of Transportation resources for the 5-county area and the Tampa Bay area. And Secretary Steinman is involved in automated and connected vehicle initiatives for the Department of Transportation. So he's going to speak to us about the future and how Florida Department of Transportation sees it. Thank you for coming so much, taking time.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of Florida DOT, we'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak today. And what I'm planning on doing is just kind of giving you a really high overview level of where Florida DOT is, some of the challenges as state governments across the country that we're experiencing with the automated vehicle effort, what we're doing as a national role, what Florida DOT specifically is doing to implement it in our state, and what we're looking to do to try to accelerate the AV technologies within Florida. Basically, this little graph here kind of shows you the general adaptation of technology over the years. And you see, in the past, it's been very slow, but as this graph keeps going, you're going to see that current technology people are adapting to it very quickly. And I know that we had a gentleman here just a little bit earlier talking about electric vehicles and possibly slow adaptation, but we really believe that autonomous vehicles are going to be a very adaptation, especially with the millennial generation as they're coming on. But at Florida DOT, when we talk about what we're trying to do here, we're looking at the automated effort more than just cars. We look at all modes of transportation, be it freight, aerospace. We're also working with Space Florida, and we're also looking at how we can use autonomous vehicles and mass transit type technologies. And there you go, that finished off, and you can kind of see toward the tail end how smartphones and tablets and stuff are just taken right off in technology adaptation. One of our biggest issues right now that we're having is distracted driving, and where the DOT believes that autonomous vehicles can really help our state and our country is the fact that driving itself has become the distraction. Everybody wants to be on their cell phone. They want to be either talking or texting or doing whatever it is that they do. The millennial generation would rather be working on their tablets rather than actually doing the active driving. And when you get to level 4 autonomy, which I'll talk about that in a few seconds, where the vehicle drives itself, that's going to free up a lot of time. It's also going to free up, and it's going to change driving patterns and usage patterns for everyone across the United States, and specifically Florida. When you look at this map here, this is the map of who has adopted legislation that allows autonomous vehicles on the roadways. Currently, there is 6 states out there that allow that. There's a few that are under consideration and a few that have currently the legislation has failed. Why is that important? You need standards across the United States that are adopted nationally so that we can continue to move this forward. The example I like to give is if you had different standards out there across on the interstates as you leave Florida and go to Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, all those type of different areas, you would, as a driver, it causes confusion, causes safety concerns. So realistically, what the DOT is pushing for and what Florida DOT is taking the lead on is nationally we're working with not only our Florida legislation delegation, but our congressional delegation to try to push national standards across the country. There's 2 different types of technologies that you need to understand when it comes to automated vehicles. There's what we call connected vehicles, and then there's autonomous vehicles. Connected vehicles is generally at the highest of levels is where the vehicle talks to the infrastructure. And in those particular cases, we're not expecting that to be what we call safety critical scenarios. But what it will do is it will give additional data so that the car can make better decisions as we get to level 4 autonomy. Then there's what we call truly autonomous vehicles, where the vehicles actually just use radar, LiDAR, all the other different sensors that we're putting on the vehicles nowadays to make the decisions to operate on the roadways. Prime example of that is in 2014, Audi was in Tampa and they were testing their technology. And what they were specifically looking at while they were in Tampa was to look at, they generally run their cars off off the sensors. But let's say that something were to happen with their system, they wanted to be able to go to a GPS backup. And so that's what they were out there testing for. And as much as I can say that I'm into the autonomous vehicle world and I like it, they let me get behind the wheel and they put all these vehicles around me. They said, go ahead, push the button and let go of everything, let the car do what it's going to do. And I'm tooling down the roadway about 75 miles an hour. And even I had to take a deep breath before I pushed the button because you've got vehicles all around you. And it is a real surreal experience the first time you do it, I will tell you. But it's amazing how intelligent these cars are and how well they're moving forward. So I just want to make the distinction here of the fact that there is two very specifically different technologies. And these slides pretty much get into the specifics. I'm not going to spend a lot of time because the slide presentation is longer than the half hour that they have allotted. I don't want to take any questions that folks might have. But as I mentioned, the autonomous vehicle is using sensors to drive down the roadway. And then when you get to connect vehicles, that's actually talking to the infrastructure using dedicated short-range communications. And there it's actually talking to the infrastructure. Probably the biggest piece I should talk about with respect to connected vehicles is that it really relies on the governments to put that type of technology into the roadways and then to be able to maintain them. And if you're following any of the funding crises that we're having at the federal level with transportation, you'll know that the federal government has done a very poor job of providing any type of reliability in the dollars that are coming to state DOTs across the country. And so the automakers, with respect to autonomous vehicles, are always going to be way out ahead of us as governments with respect to connected vehicles. It's not that there isn't the desire or the want, but right now we're struggling to maintain the infrastructure we have, much less put this high-dollar infrastructure that's changing almost daily into our system. General Motors at the ITS World Congress in Detroit last year announced that this coming year that all their Cadillac models will have what they call Super Cruise. And what that is it's a level 3 autonomous technology. In the simplest way to talk about the different levels, level 0 is basically no autonomy. The driver drives the vehicle themselves. Level 1, this is very simple definitions, is you have one type of autonomy on the vehicle. For example, cruise control is level 1 autonomy. To give you an example, level 2 autonomy is when you have two systems working together. The easiest way to describe that is if you ever watched the Mercedes-Benz commercial where the soccer ball goes out in the street and the little girl runs after it. In that particular commercial, the car has automatic braking systems and cruise type systems ongoing. The guy's not paying attention. The car stops itself because it senses the little girl. So that's two systems working together. Level 3 is the fact that the car can basically drive itself, and that's what Super Cruise is going to be all about. But a driver has to be available in case the system gets confused. It gives the driver a warning. So in this particular case, the Super Cruise is going to work in limited situations, stop and go traffic on the interstate per se. If anybody live in Tampa and you go 275, you'll really enjoy that feature because that's my trip to work every day. It's always jammed up no matter what we do. Or if you're in highway mode where it's not extremely congested, you'd be able to use this type of technology. One of our previous speakers talked about Tesla. Tesla rolled out their level 3 autonomy in their vehicles, and they did it through a computer system upgrade, which I thought was really cool. And that's working now, and that's a level 3 style autonomous feature. So everyone keeps telling me that it's going to be a long time before this really happens. What's going to happen to you? It's going to happen to you without you really knowing it, because it's going to constantly become features on the vehicle that you're going to buy. My 2014 GMC truck has a ton of features on it that they just keep putting it on there, and that's how it's really going to get acceptance, because you're just going to expect it. It's going to be no different than the tablet. A few years ago, I would have to venture most of you didn't know what a tablet was, much less why you needed one. If I asked you to raise your hand, I bet you 50% of the people in the room own one. It's the same type of concept that's really going to happen with this type of technology. Some of the challenges with respect to the implementation, there really is no business model. And when I say that is, DOTs across the country tend to look backwards for what's happened in the past, and that's how we project what we're going to do for the future. This is what we call a completely disruptive technology. There is no way to look backwards and use anything we've done in the past to really model where it's going in the future. And why I say that is because a lot of what DOTs do with respect to planning for roads and infrastructure is directly related to land use. With this type of technology, if you get a true level 4 autonomous vehicle out on the street, there's a lot of things that are going to change. Number one, if you stop and think about it, a car doesn't need a sign. Level 4 autonomous vehicles don't need a sign. So I wouldn't have to put signs up on the roadway. Basically, the lane width that we use as engineers to put out on the interstates are 12 foot wide. It's not because we need a 12 foot wide lane, it's because the average human driver has what we call an error factor. And so you don't start clipping everybody on either side of you. We give you basically room for error. You could actually narrow those lanes down. The largest trucks on the roadway only need a 10 foot lane. You could save 2 feet. Imagine how much right of way we could no longer need to purchase as DOTs if we could start narrowing lanes down to 10 feet. You can decrease the distance, the average stopping distance that we have to calculate for human reaction is completely different than a computer. All these things can start tightening up. You can start getting more efficiency out of the current systems that we have on the ground today and use that latent capacity that we can currently use. So business models need to completely change as autonomous vehicles get more and more out and more commonplace on the market. We're going to need new funding investment sources for investment. As I just mentioned, this technology is extremely expensive. If we're truly going to go to connected vehicles, governments are going to have to figure out how we're going to do that. Right now, we don't have the money in most states to even maintain what we have. Now, I will tell you that Florida is extremely blessed with our funding scenario that our legislature has given us. Most states, and I've worked in 2 other DOTs, Michigan and Idaho. Florida is my 3rd DOT that I've been. I will tell you that most states run generally at the rate of 85% of their funding comes from the federal government for transportation and 15% comes from the states. In Florida, we're exactly opposite. 25% of what we spend is federal money and 75% is state money. So while other states are canceling projects right now and not investing in their infrastructure because of the uncertainties at the federal side, we as Florida have about a 6 to 8 month, what we call cushion that we've sat with in the bank so that our projects just keep rolling. So we don't stop our construction, we don't stop investing in our infrastructure, and which is doing great things for our economy. If you want to know why our economy is picking up and running so well, is you got to have a good transportation system to have a solid economy. And the way we've set ourselves up in Florida, we're blessed. And so we aren't going to be as in a tough situation in some states, but there's a lot of states out there that are going to struggle. The data issues, who owns the data? Obviously, that data is information, and information is money anymore. Obviously, the automakers want it. If the DOTs collect it, we have whole issues with sunshine laws in Florida and such that we're dealing with. And then the whole concept, if we have connected technology, how do we secure that? Cybersecurity issues. Even our big changeable message boards across the interstates are constantly getting hacked. No matter what we do to try to put security on those things, the hackers are always ahead of us. So those are things that we have to try to work out. And then there's going to be the whole concept of interoperability. And what that basically means is you go from state to state that all these different systems talk to each other. So, and those are some of the platforms we're trying to work on right now. AASHTO is our state coalition at a national level that we have, and this is exactly what we're working on at the AASHTO level. Interoperability, reciprocity, doing some testing and pilots, and basically trying to avoid the whole concept of piecemeal regulations. So that's what the states are currently trying to work on right now with respect to this. The US DOT invited some selected states and groups to Washington, D.C. back in May of this year to really start talking about what each state's doing and who is the recognized leaders. And as you can see, Florida is one of the recognized leaders in what's going on. Having come from Michigan, I can tell you that Michigan DOT is really focused on working with the OEMs, with the automakers, and the Tier 1 suppliers, and they're working on all the toys that go into the cars. Our take in Florida is really not to necessarily look at the toys that are going in the cars, because we don't have the OEMs here based in Florida to do that, but what we're really focusing on is how can we set up the infrastructure, and what are those types of engineering changes that we have to make these systems successful. Prime example is that right now a lot of those systems use cameras to read pavement markings. Working with the automakers, what can we do to our pavement markings that go on this road today to make these systems more efficient and effective out there to try to drive that technology forward. We're going to put the pavement markings down anyway, so what do I got to do to make it more efficient and effective for the systems, as a simple example of what I'm trying to describe. And so that was a great day of exchanging ideas and again, trying to get everybody on the same page and avoiding that whole piecemeal concept of regulations. One of the other things that Florida did that is actually, that was highly touted when we were up there in May was the fact that our state secretary put together a steering team, which I always find kind of funny that a autonomous vehicle group has to have a steering team, but that's a little weird. But why is this important? It's really so that even though Florida is blessed with our funding, our dollars are still limited because we have more needs in the state of Florida than we have money. So the idea of the steering team is to come together and to really decide where we're going to invest in what technologies and how will we invest in Florida. And that's what we're doing here. And I'm on that steering team, so it's pretty interesting to try to get people to step out of their comfort zone and look to the future. So that's been very fun. And what are we trying to really work on? We're working on a strategic plan. We're looking at, as I mentioned, our design standards and how we're going to invest in our infrastructure. We're looking at how we're going to develop some testing facilities. We're looking at non-traditional partnerships, which I'm going to touch on in a minute. And in 2016, probably our next biggest step is after we roll out the strategic plan, we're looking at how we're going to start incorporating this into our 5-year work program. Our 5-year work program is the commitments that we make to the state of Florida as DOT is what we're going to build and how we're going to do that. So that in the coming year, you'll start to see more and more of these commitments that we're making. Some of the current initiatives that we have ongoing. In 2011, we had the ITS World Congress in Orlando, and we put a test bed in operation for that World Congress, and it's still in operation. It's still collecting data. We do a ton of public outreach and education, such as seminars like this. When I came to Florida back in 2013, I pushed then Secretary Prasad to allow me to have the first autonomous vehicle conference in Florida. And I will tell you, a lot of people kind of chuckled at me and said, really, that's really the best thing you think you got going? And they kind of laughed and said, if I got 50 people at the first conference, they thought that would be a success. We cut it off at 225. Last year in Orlando, we had the next one, we cut off at 500. Our next one is in Jacksonville, right up the road here at the port of Jacksonville. It'll be December 1st through 3rd. And right now we're estimating 750 people. So we're actually attracting people. The one in Orlando attracted 23 states. So we're pretty excited. We developed some stakeholder working groups within the DOT in the transportation community, which I'm going to touch on. We have a number of university region or research partnerships, some pilot projects, and looks like I need to correct my slide. I got working groups twice. Stakeholder working groups are a whole cross-section of folks. It's not just DOT folks, but we're actually soliciting industry and universities and these types of folks to give us their input. What are you expecting from autonomous vehicles? How can it help your industry? What are the stumbling blocks that you see? So these have been great groups to work in. We have basically 3 primary areas. We're looking at policy and legal issues. One of the biggest legal issues is when you have an autonomous vehicle, who's liable if it gets into a crash. The insurance companies are really interested in that, and the insurance industry is part of our working group. Our infrastructure and technology groups, basically that's all the geeks, all the engineers get together and we talk about how we're going to make all that stuff happen, everything from lane widths, pavement markings to DSRC equipment to all that type of stuff. So that's all the engineering side. And then we're also, as I mentioned, working with mobile applications, working with people like Publix and UPS and FedEx, and looking at the freight side and how can we do platooning to not only increase fuel economy for them, but also to to utilize the autonomous technology so that you can group these trucks together as they're going down the interstate. How we can do that at night because you can remove the human factor. Have them go longer distances because you don't have to worry about CDL requirements. We're also working with the modal side, and I'll touch on a pilot project we got going on in Tampa here in a minute. But looking at how we can use this technology in mass transit opportunities. I will tell you that I'll bet you every one of you have ridden in an autonomous vehicle, and I will say that because most of our airports in Florida have people movers. The first people mover, most people don't know this, actually was put in the Tampa International Airport. George Beam put that in 32 years ago. He commissioned General Electric to build that for him. What is the people mover? It's basically a rubber tire train that you get on, the doors open automatically. There's no one driving that thing. It's all done off a computer, and you go flying toward a brick wall at 35 miles an hour, and you better hope that little brakes work, because if you don't, you're going to be introduced to the security system on the other side of the wall because if it doesn't stop. Every one of you have ridden in an autonomous vehicle. I guarantee it. If you've flown at all, whether it be in Florida or other areas of the country, they're there today in the airline industry. The pilots don't really fly the plane most of the time. It's usually done on autopilot. I don't want to scare anybody who doesn't realize that, but that's the reality of it. Autonomous vehicles aren't anything really new. It's just new in the world of cars because it's a lot more complex. Some of the pilot projects that we've got going on, one of them is actually with respect to the freight industry, is down in Miami. The Port of Miami brings in 80% of the fresh flowers that are used in our country. Most people don't know that. It's a very time-sensitive product, and it follows a very defined route. So we're actually testing on Miami International Airport's grounds, moving the flower product. So that's one of the pilots we currently have ongoing. In Tampa, it's not truly an autonomous technology, but it's a driver assistant technology where I've outfitted some of my DOT vehicles, a number of the Hillsborough Hart buses, some of the T-Bar vans and those type of things with some driver assist features from a company called Mobileye. And what they're doing is they're actually taking the data and using the data of how people drive to define their algorithms for how they would develop their autonomous vehicle. Because you need to understand how the average person drives to predict what the people next to you are going to do. The biggest issue they're finding with autonomous vehicles is they're too nice. They're called granny vehicles because they follow all the rules. They don't accelerate, they don't cut you off, they don't do all the stupid things that we as humans do. So it's very interesting how they're trying to decide, should they give these algorithms basically a little bit more leeway, or should they keep them to be very safe? And I guess my view of it is, the more of these you get on there, we probably ought to keep them at the more conservative level, but that's my personal opinion. But long story short, there's a number of pilot projects we're looking at. We're looking at also what we call last mile technologies. There's basically, I call them glorified stand-up golf carts that you can use in retirement communities to help people, to shuttle people around retirement communities, for example. And that company is actually based out of Tampa as well. And we're looking at where we could possibly use those type of vehicles within very defined areas. We're looking at some stuff at the Port of Tampa. Port of Tampa's got 5,000 acres, moves a lot of product. Again, a very closed track system. So we're looking at how we could possibly use autonomous technology to continue to further that at our ports as well. Partnership opportunities. I talked about the connected vehicle test bed. THEA just recently, the Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority just recently received a US DOT grant to do some more testing on the Selma Expressway in the Tampa area. FDOT has been part of that process, helping them along. It's not only going to test going to do some autonomous technology on their system, but also on the city streets of Tampa. And it's going to include things such as pedestrian recognition systems and parking issues where you can do autonomous parking. So that's ongoing. It's a $17 million grant from US DOT, and that was just announced here a few months ago. Florida DOT is going to actually develop our own test track in the Lakeland area. We have 400 acres there that we're going to do that. It's going to be for a couple different reasons. It's going to be in conjunction with the Florida Turnpike Enterprise because we have to test high-speed tolling technologies. We're also going to be doing some things there with autonomous vehicle technologies. We're also working with Space Florida, not only at the Kennedy Space Center to utilize some of the old shuttle facilities that they have, but they're very interested in testing drone technologies. And where our location is, it's a restricted airspace, so they'd be able to do some drone technology testing, they being Space Florida, out at that test track when we get it completed. So there's going to be a lot of cool things going on that way. And so basically what I'm trying to tell you is that there's a lot going on in Florida, and that it's a new emerging technology, and just Florida is a true leader because we have a little bit of money to invest in it. We have a really good population for it, the elderly population, which in a lot of cases sometimes is restricted from what they can do, and the autonomous technology really allows them newfound freedom that you'll lose as you get older. So Florida, with our aging population and we tend to attract, is really a very good test market. The other big thing that we have is a ton of rental cars. The auto industries are very interested in Florida to test autonomous technologies because we have the largest rental car fleet in the country that's based here in Florida with all the, last year we attracted 100 million visitors in Florida. And a lot of them come from outside the United States, and so they tend to struggle. If you look at some of our crash statistics, they tend to be a lot of our tourists. So if you could actually put autonomous technology in there where they weren't driving, it's going to increase our overall road safety within Florida just because it takes away that human element again and that human error that drives the crashes. As I mentioned, our next summit is December 1st, 2nd, and we just added a third day, December 3rd in Jacksonville. If you go out to our website, you can sign up today for that. As I mentioned, we are going to start cutting it off at 750 people, so I don't know where we currently are with our registration, but it seems like it's a pretty popular event, so I would recommend if you're interested to sign up sooner before later. And with that, there is the website that I mentioned, and I have a couple minutes for questions if anybody's got some.
Tesla's gone on record of saying they think they'll be technologically ready for a fully autonomous vehicle in 2 to 3 years, but that they expect that it'll take perhaps that much additional time for the legislation, but for authorities to approve it. Do you feel that the state of Florida seems to be more advanced than other states in this area? Is it possible that Florida might precede, let's say, a national level of authority on the subject, or is that not possible?
As I showed you in a previous slide, which states are kind of leading the way. Florida, Tesla is going to look to Florida, Nevada, and California, and I will say that for simple reasons. We don't have snow. The biggest issue with an autonomous vehicle right now is it doesn't know how to handle snow. It screws those things. I mean, there's a reason why this technology hasn't just skyrocketed off the page when it comes to vehicles. It's because it doesn't understand how to handle snow. And that's the biggest thing that they're struggling with respect to an autonomous vehicle. So as much as Michigan wants to be the big cheese in this, and I can say this because I came from there, so I'm not slamming anybody because I was there at one point in time. I'm here to tell you that that is going to be the issue. We also have a great relationship with Tesla because of SpaceX is over here at the port, or over at the Cape, and so Elon Musk has a soft spot for Florida. So we are continuing to push that and use that to try to bring as much into Florida. People question me a lot, why is it such a big deal? What we're trying to do is if you stop and think about the 3D printer, the last conference I went to, there was 3 or 4 different vehicles sitting on the ground that were completely made with a 3D printer. And they ran. You could go and start them up. The concept of the typical OEM is changing. It's changing fast. You're not going to need to be the General Motors. You're not going to need to have, those types. What we're trying to do is we're trying to bring some of these groups, these startups into Florida, high tech, high skill, high paying positions. Behind all this that we're doing, never doubt that what DOT is working on is trying to drive the economy. How do we drive the economy of the state of Florida?
So you feel that we could implement it before it was a nationally kind of implemented?
I would definitely say that. Senator Brandis in Pinellas County, he happens to be in my district, but he's also one of the leaders on this. He has been pushing autonomous technologies long before I even got here, which is one of the reasons that attracted me to this position was the fact that I knew where he was, and I was going to try to dovetail some of the things that I had interest in with what he had going on. And so he is still very interested in making Florida, using this to attract business to the state of Florida. So yes, I think that Florida's very uniquely positioned with our test track that we're talking about building on that 400 acres that we have. I think that's also going to really draw a lot of not only research dollars in, but these companies right now. I was talking to an outfit just 2 days ago, and I was asking them about them doing some testing with the truck platooning. And I said, "You guys going up to the GM track up in Detroit, or you going to the Chrysler track up in the Flint area?" And this, that, and the other. I says, "Man, we can't even get on that." Right now, there's a need for testing facilities to do this stuff because their biggest issue is trying to protect trade secrets. So anything that we set up has to be able to be protected. That's why Space Florida is so interested in the particular site that we have, because it's restricted airspace. You can go do stuff there that you can't do anyplace else because it's restricted. And so that's why we really believe that 400 acres is going to be a gem and we'll really be able to draw companies into the state of Florida. But it'll start as a testing concept. That whole last mile solution, the augmented golf cart basically that I was talking about, that company just came to do some testing down here. And they love Tampa so much, they actually now they're based out of Tampa, they're based out of USF's Research Innovation Park. So trying to do more of that, we're trying to draw that into the area. With what Mr. Benning's doing downtown in Tampa as well, trying to draw high-tech, high-skilled jobs in. It's kind of coalescing pretty well for us. Sir?
Is this automation, is it agnostic to ICE versus electric vehicle, or does it favor and prefer and will accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles?
How you power the vehicle with respect to the autonomy, it doesn't really make a difference to us. Other than one thing I would say is that all these different LiDAR, radars, all these different sensors that we got, they're an electrical draw. So what that's going to mean is your batteries are going to have to be bigger if you're going to do purely electric, just because of all the different things that it's running. But I would say that in reality, it doesn't really make a difference to us what's powering the thing, as long as we get it has the capacity to give us the.
But in reality, electric vehicles are flying by wire already, so that would provide a sort of an intrinsic advantage to electric vehicles. Because most of what's going on, even though there are mechanical backups, like the steering wheel is an example, it's mechanical, but it's being flown by wire when you're in an autonomous mode. So it would seem that electric vehicles would be intrinsically at an advantage.
I guess that is beyond my skill set. I'm not going to try to get into that. I'm just trying to tell you that from my perspective of the stuff that I do, it doesn't really, I just need it to go down the road. Some of the other, literally. I will say, just because we're talking about, and this is, you guys' realm, there's two things I probably should say that the department's also doing, autonomous vehicles, but it's cool in its own right. District 7 and District 4 and Turnpike have started putting electric chargers at our facilities. And if you go to those apps, you'll find that you can actually plug in your electric vehicles there. Ours is it takes about 4 hours to charge your vehicle, so I'm guessing from what the gentleman was saying, it's a level 2. Second thing is that when I was in Idaho, I helped a gentleman who was very big into developing solar panels to use them as the surface for a roadway. So basically solar roadways. I helped him get a federal highway grant to further what he was doing some research on, and he's coming to Tampa in December. We're looking at trying to do a pilot on a bike path with his solar panels. Whole concept driving to use the roadway as a surface to generate electricity. So two things kind of off the wall, but very similar.
One of your slides talked about 80% of accidents were avoidable. I'm curious about the other 20% that are not. Can you just speak to that?
Well, when we say avoidable, we basically are referring to the fact that it's a result of human error. You got 20% of it, like in the snow states and stuff, where if you hit ice or something, you really can't say that's human error because it's a roadway condition, or if an animal runs out in front, you know, there's other factors that cause crashes. So, but when we were talking about those 80%, when I talked about the fact that we have a 12-foot wide lane, even with the 12-foot wide lane, we still have people trying to play bumper cars out there because they're, like I said, they're texting, they're doing this, they're eating their cheeseburger, they're doing whatever they're doing, yelling at their kid. A bee flew in the window. You know, that's serious. I read crash reports all the time. You'd be amazed at what is put on a crash report. Sir.
So the state of Florida is ranked #1 in pedestrian fatality. Are there any pilot projects that deals with V2X in Florida?
When I talked about the fact that the pilot project that the money Thea got was going to include the whole bike pedestrian piece, that's some of the stuff that we're trying to, we've got some stuff that we want to test. We don't know how good it's going to be. I'm not going to promise that it's going to. The crazy part about the whole pedestrian issue, and we've been struggling with it mightily in Tampa, is I don't care how many crosswalks I put up, I don't care how many signals I put up. Some of the crashes and some of the fatalities in Tampa that we see are 50 foot from a traffic signal. They don't want to walk 50 foot down to the thing to push the button to walk across. They try to just, you know, they like to play Frogger, I call it. If you ever grew up in my area, they play Frogger. It's amazing to me how people do that. I mean, one of the crashes the other day, and you got to feel for this grandmother, and it's a terrible tragedy with the kid, but she let her kid off into a turn. She let her kid out in the middle of a turn lane, a 5-lane cross section, and someone came up into the turn lane behind him. It was dark out, and killed the girl. I mean, and the school was, you know, basically less than a block up. I mean, who lets their kid off in a turn lane? You know, those are the type of human errors. You want to talk about human errors that I don't know how you solve that, because.
But the technology should be able to detect any movement.
Well,
infrared.
The cars will be able to detect it, and we do expect that that's going to help us improve those. I didn't play one of the videos I have, but actually Volvo's got that as one of their things where the guy's driving, he's not paying attention, he's drinking a coffee or whatever, and the lady walks out in front of him, and the car senses it and stops. It's going to help. All these things are going to help. But I don't want to paint a Tennessee of it's the be-all solution, because there's still going to be things out there that are going to happen.
Yes, so I was recently at a conference at the University of Ohio State University, and it had to do with autonomous vehicles. And so there were two things that came up. Number one, the insurance companies. Right now, the insurance companies are kind of backing off because they're not showing transparent. It's a lot of risk, it's a lot of liability. And who actually owns liability in terms of something happens and you're in an autonomous vehicle. And also, there's a website called Robohawk. And there's an interesting article on there about if you're in an autonomous vehicle and the vehicle has to make a decision between hitting a pedestrian and doing something that's going to kill you as a passenger, who makes that decision?
Okay.
The vehicle or?
I will go to the first one first, because it's going to probably be easier, not to sound crazy. Right now, the way it's kind of trending with the insurance companies and the auto industry is the auto industry, Volvo has already come out and taken a stance on this. They're saying that if a crash can be, if one of their vehicles are in a crash, and it can be attributed to the fact that their system failed, then the auto industry is going to take the liability. If it's something else, where, because there's just going to be this goofy transition period like we always have, where there's going to be autonomous vehicles, there's going to be human-driven vehicles. If it's something else, then it's going to go back to the insurance companies. And that's kind of pretty much how it's kind of playing out right now, as I watch this play out, and that's what I expect is going to happen. It's not finalized, but the mere fact that Volvo has taken a stance, I got to believe the rest of the car companies are going to do the same. So that's where I think that's going to go. more to come on that one, that isn't decided. The whole moral issue, that's a whole piece that we really haven't, when it comes to programming, how you program a vehicle, it hasn't been figured out. And I don't know where that's going to end up being. Because really what it comes down to is you're trying to give a computer system or a computer program some moral, to make a moral decision on which one is more, you know, whose life is more, is worth saving. I understand what you're saying.
That's actually a question that came up, I believe, the criminal philosophy at Ohio State. And they're playing a conference for next spring, centered around a whole issue.
We've heard this before, and we don't have the answer for it yet. I mean, like I said, this isn't done by any stretch of the imagination, but like I always tell people, I always pull out my cell phone and say, I grew up on a farm in Michigan, and when I grew up, they had a party line. You picked up the phone, you had to kick your neighbor off so you could actually use the phone. And now, because I'm an engineer and I'm kind of tight with my pennies, if you'd have told me I'd be spending what I'm spending to keep my family on these smartphone systems, I would have told you that you're absolutely crazy. If you told me 5 years ago, I would have told you you're crazy. You don't know me well enough to know that I wouldn't do that. So, not only do I have one phone, but because I got two of them. So, that's what I'm trying to tell you. You'll be amazed at how quickly this will be adopted. Just because if you're starting to watch the adoption rates of technology, that's why I start with that one slide, because everyone tells me I'm crazy. But I always tell everybody that by 2025, I guarantee you, everybody in this room will have a level 3 autonomous vehicle. I'll put money on it right now. Everyone calls me crazy and they tell me that I've fallen and hit my head. But 3 years ago when I came to Florida and really started pushing the whole concept of trying to get Florida out there, everybody thought I was crazy too. Now look at it, we'll have 750 people. I guarantee we'll have 750 people in Jacksonville. We'll have to cut it off again. And it's just who we are anymore as a society.
That kind of reinforced how quickly this may happen. Tesla, as you mentioned, they implemented their autopilot just a few days ago. And the entire Tesla fleet now, I guess they have a different type of connected vehicle than you just driving your slides. They're connected 24/7 to Tesla mothership. So the entire Tesla fleet is doing high definition mapping, geographic mapping as they drive. People, my part of them have it, but others do. So they're collecting this real-time data on the millions of miles that they started to drive. And at the same time, the drivers, as you mentioned also in this slide, are training the system. And so I can see that, in a very short time, with this, millions of miles of training data, metadata, that they could very easily technologically get to the point where they have an autonomous car a lot quicker than any of us usually think. Certainly about 420.
I certainly agree, and that's in this presentation. That normally takes me about 3 hours to get through. I buzzed right through it and kind of gave you an extremely high level of this thing. I could get into a whole bunch of details that I knew I didn't have time, so I didn't even try. I tried to just give you a brief overview of what's up in the state.
No, I was just trying to reinforce the fact that it's going to happen.
Oh, that's going to happen.
So just quickly, the future of this, so by 2025, we're all going to have automated vehicles. Is that from a DOT standpoint, they're going to be on this road, you have to go to the automated to reduce congestion? Is that where this is going?
Well, from a DOT perspective, why we're very excited about it. Number one, it's going to, I didn't put Florida DOT's mission up there, but it's to have congestion and fatality-free roadways. That's our mission statement. When that mission statement was actually written in 1972.
It's going to happen.
Now, what's happened since 1972? Congestion in Florida's gotten worse and our fatality rates are higher. We've been doing a pretty poor job of it, not because we've been trying to do a poor job, but with the volume of, with the change of population in Florida and all that type of stuff, it's definitely been a challenge for the DOT. But autonomous vehicles really are the first major breakthrough that's going to allow us to actually probably achieve that. Because there is latent capacity on our system today. I'll give you this example. I'm redoing I-275 through Tampa. When I started closing certain interchanges, well, you would have thought the world was going to come to an end. You know, Carmageddon was coming, Tampa was going to be locked up, and I was going to be thrown out my ear because that was the dumbest person alive. If you would read newspapers, that's basically what they were saying about me. First day, it was a little rough, but by second day, you wouldn't even have known that I closed the interchange. Why? Because there's latent capacity all through our system. People, I hate to break to you folks, but we're all creatures of habit. We do the same thing that we always do because we always do it that way. We get into a habit, that's what we do. I'm an engineer, and I do all kinds of crazy things, and my family thinks I'm the strangest person alive, but one day, for about a month, I always tried to leave for work, take the same route every day. I tried to leave at the same time, and I wanted to see if I could start recognizing the cars in front of me on I-275 in the traffic jam. It got to the point that I was able to wave at these people because I actually knew the same people were going to be in the same cars. I could come up behind a car and I could tell you who was in the car, not by name, but it was going to be a lady with blonde hair, and I guarantee she's going to be late. She's going to be putting her makeup on. I can almost guarantee every time I would go by that lady. And it's not. And if there was a crash, it didn't make a difference because the same people were on the interstate at the same time. Now I'm the type of person, I grab my phone every morning and I look up Google and I say, okay, what's red on that map on my way to work? I try to go a route so I don't have to get caught in traffic because time is money to me. I mean, when I'm sitting in traffic, I'm not accomplishing it. And that's what the computers will do. An autonomous vehicle isn't going to care how you normally go to work. It's going to, you're going to pick, do I want to go to the interstate? And it's going to tell you what it's going to be. Do I want it to be the most efficient? It's going to tell you what it's going to be. Do I want to have to pay tolls? It's going to tell you how to get there. If I don't want to pay tolls, it's going to tell you how to get there. And it's going to do it to maximize efficiency and maximize the use of the system. So I go back to the whole issue of closing that interchange. What ends up happening when we reopen that interchange? Capacity on the interchange is actually down. Because people find out, you know what, I can go a different route. It actually saves me time. And so they don't come back to the same route. So now I've retrained them like sheep to go a different way. There is latent capacity all across the state that we just don't use. But people use the same route every day, all the time, because, I hate to break it to you folks, but like you do the same thing all the time because you're a creature of habit. That's just the reality. It's not meant to be disrespectful, but stop and think about it. How many people take a different route to work throughout the day? Well, there's 2 or 3 of you, but how many people are in the room? My point exactly. People do the same thing because they get into a habit of doing the same thing all the time. So, autonomous vehicles are going to solve a safety issue, they're going to solve a capacity issue, and it's going to allow us to use our system more efficiently and effectively. And quite frankly, if you get to level 4, the biggest change you're probably going to see that you guys don't even realize is if you're a family of 2 or 3 cars, you might be a family of 1 car in the future, and you just might use your Uber app to call up a vehicle to come pick you up for the odd times that you need it, because the cost-benefit ratio is going to be such that you wouldn't necessarily need to have 3 vehicles. And I realize that it really sounded like a geek when I said that, but the reality of it is, stop and think about your car. What's it do 95% of the time?
Yes.
Exactly. How's that going to change? Why is that a big deal? Because that also changes how cities plan for parking. It changes for how cities do land use. It changes how subdivisions are developed. It changes how many parking spots, how big a garage you have. Think of all the things that has a ripple effect to that you aren't even thinking about yet, and how autonomous vehicles are going to change your life. You are living history, folks. You don't realize it, but you're living history right now. Way over time. Sorry, I got a cold too, so I'm sort of losing my voice. Good time to quit.
There's no problem. There's always so much.